For centuries, people tried to prove that God exists using reason. They had three main arguments. First, that God's existence is built into the very definition of a perfect being. Second, that everything must have a cause, and so the universe must be caused by God. Third, that the beauty and order in nature suggest a designer. A philosopher spends hundreds of pages arguing that we can't prove God exists. Then he turns around and says, but we must still believe in God, not because of logic, but because of something deeper. That was Immanuel Kant. He was one of the most important thinkers in history. He didn't just ask what we can know, he asked what we should believe, how we should live, and whether God and religion have a real place in our lives. This video explores what Kant said about religion and God, not from the point of view of blind faith or religious tradition, but from the inside out, through reason, through ethics, through us. Kant took each of these arguments and showed why they don't work. Take the first one, called the ontological argument. Just saying that a perfect being must exist doesn't make it real. You can imagine a perfect island too, but that doesn't make it pop into existence. For Kant, existence is not something you can just define into something. The second and third arguments also fall short. Why? Because we only understand cause and effect inside our experience, what we see and feel. We don't get to apply these ideas beyond that to something like God who's supposed to be outside time and space. So can we know that God exists? According to Kant, no. I had to deny knowledge in order to make room for faith. He didn't say God doesn't exist. He said that our minds are simply not built to know things beyond what we experience. We can think about God, but we can't prove him. Here's where things get interesting. Kant says, if we can't prove God exists, maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe the better question is, not does God exist, but do we need to believe in God to live a good life? This is the heart of his second big book, The Critique of Practical Reason. In it, he shifts focus from what we can know to what we ought to do. That means ethics, morality, right and wrong. And here's what Kant believed. Inside each of us, there's a voice, a sense of duty, a feeling that some things are simply right and some things are wrong, no matter what we want and no matter what the outcome. He called this inner command the categorical imperative. Act only on that rule, which you could want everyone to follow. So if you're thinking of lying to get out of trouble, ask yourself, what if everyone lied when it was convenient? Trust would collapse. Society would fall apart. This idea doesn't come from religion. It doesn't come from fear. It comes from us, from our inner sense of right and wrong. Now comes Kant's next big step. If morality is real, if we really are free to choose right over wrong, then we have to believe in three things. That we are free, that our soul lasts beyond this life, that there is a God who makes justice possible. Let's unpack each one. First, freedom. Think about this. If every action we take is just the result of biology or outside causes, then how can we be morally responsible? Kant says that when we feel a moral choice, when we feel we should do something even if we don't want to, that proves we're not just machines. We feel free. We can't prove this freedom with science, but we feel it every time we choose what's right, even when it's hard. Second, immortality of the soul. We all know life isn't fair. Good people suffer. Selfish people often get ahead. If doing good doesn't lead to happiness, then what's the point? Kant says that if we're serious about moral values, we must believe that goodness will someday be rewarded. Maybe not now, but in a life beyond this one. That's why we hope for something more, an afterlife where justice is finally done. Let's now look at the third thing Kant says we need to believe if we take morality seriously: God. Why God? Well, Imagine a world where doing good never matters, where liars, cheaters, and oppressors always win, and where honest, kind people suffer quietly and die forgotten. If we truly believe there's no justice, ever, why would we keep trying to be good? Kant says we don't need a God who punishes or rewards like a judge in the sky. What we need is a deeper guarantee, a reason to believe that goodness has meaning, that moral effort is not wasted. So even though we can't prove God with logic or science, Kant says morality gives us a reason to believe, not as knowledge, but as hope. The moral law leads inevitably to religion. To be clear, he isn't saying belief in God makes us moral, it's the other way around. Because we are moral beings, we need a worldview where moral striving makes sense. That's what the idea of God offers, the hope that the world, deep down, is just. Faith, not proof. This kind of belief, based on moral need rather than scientific proof, is what Kant calls faith. Not blind faith, not superstition, but a reasonable trust that the world is not random. That behind all the pain and unfairness of life, there is a deeper purpose. And this is important. For Kant, faith begins where knowledge ends. He doesn't pretend to have answers to ultimate mysteries. He simply says, we must live as if goodness matters. And if that's true, then belief in God is not just allowed, it's necessary. Kant doesn't stop at belief. He takes a hard look at how religion is practiced, and he's not impressed. In his book, Religion Within the Limits of Reason Alone, Kant says something bold. A religion is only good if it helps us become morally better. Let that sink in. He's not interested in miracles or ceremonies. He says religious rituals, holy texts, and churches are only valuable if they help people grow in goodness. If they become tools of power, fear, or blind obedience, then they're not really serving religion. They're hiding it. Kant believed that many churches had become obsessed with rules and rewards, while forgetting the true point of religion, to build a just and compassionate world. So what does Kant think a true religious community looks like? Not one united by dogmas or shared rituals, but one united by a shared commitment to moral principles. The real church, he says, is made up of people, no matter their background or belief system, who live according to the moral law within, who treat others with respect, who act out of duty, not fear. In this sense, Kant's religion is deeply personal. It's not about obeying orders or chasing rewards. It's about becoming the kind of person who acts justly, even when no one's watching. Kant also warns against building faith on shaky ground. For example, miracles. Can we trust them? Not really, he says, because our senses can fool us, and the more unbelievable the story, the less we can rely on it. And prayer? It's not wrong, but it should never be used to ask for special treatment, like changing natural laws or skipping consequences. For Kant, prayer is more meaningful when it helps us reflect, focus, or commit ourselves more deeply to our duties. He's not against religion, he's against religion without ethics. One of the bravest things Kant did was to challenge religious authorities who worked too closely with political power. In his time, Prussian officials wanted to control what professors taught about religion. They didn't like Kant's books, especially his Religion Within the Limits of Reason Alone. At age 69, when most people would stay quiet, Kant refused to back down. He published his work outside Prussia, even though he was warned by the king to stop writing about religion. "I will remain silent, out of respect for the king's authority, but not because I think I am wrong," he replied. It was a powerful stand for academic freedom and for the right to think and believe freely. Religion is about action, not belief. By now, we've seen that for Kant, religion is not about what you believe. It's about how you live. You can go to church, say your prayers, and memorize scripture. But if your actions don't reflect honesty, kindness, and respect for others, then you're missing the point. The essence of religion is morality, Kant says. In fact, he believed that doing good because you expect a reward from God isn't really moral at all. True morality means doing the right thing simply because it's right, not because you're trying to earn heaven or avoid hell. This is why Kant put so much weight on the goodwill. The only thing that is good without qualification is a goodwill. Not talent, not intelligence, not even results, just the intention to do what's right for its own sake. When Kant talks about God, he's not imagining a miracle worker who interferes with nature or punishes sinners with thunderbolts. He sees God as the symbol of perfect justice and moral order, a kind of ultimate goal that gives meaning to our ethical striving. We don't follow moral laws to please God. We follow them because they come from within us. But belief in God helps us trust that those moral efforts aren't in vain. It's not about fear, it's about hope. Hope that this is a just world, that our inner sense of right and wrong means something, that goodness is part of the fabric of reality. In his third major book, The Critique of Judgment, Kant turns to something more intuitive: our sense of beauty. Have you ever looked at a sunset, a flower, or a perfectly symmetrical snowflake and felt something beyond words, something that seemed meaningful? Kant thinks that when we experience beauty, we're not just enjoying shapes or colors, we're sensing a kind of harmony, as if the world has order, even purpose. Now, Kant doesn't say beauty proves God, but he does think that our deep response to beauty supports the moral faith we carry inside us. Beauty feels like a hint, a clue, that the universe is not just chaos, that it might, somehow, be pointing us toward meaning. One of the most radical parts of Kant's philosophy is this: true religion does not begin in fear of punishment or hope of reward. It begins in the heart with a respect for the moral law. For Kant, God is not a cosmic judge keeping score, and religion is not a bargain. I'll be good if you bless me. Instead, religion is about dignity, self-respect, the understanding that we are all ends in ourselves, not tools to be used, but beings to be valued. That's why Kant famously said, "Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in yourself or in another, always as an end and never as a means only." This is as close as Kant comes to a sacred command, not because it's written in a holy book, but because it's written in every moral heart. Here's a powerful idea. Kant believed that morality is for everyone. No matter your culture, religion, or beliefs, we all share a basic sense of right and wrong. It's part of being human. But religion? That's more personal. It grows out of how we make sense of the world, how we live with mystery, and how we face suffering, injustice, and death. Kant's message is this: let morality lead, let religion follow. Don't start with dogma and try to fit your ethics around it. Start with conscience, and let that shape your view of the divine. Kant's religious philosophy was bold in his time, and it's still relevant today. He didn't reject religion, he reclaimed it. He stripped it of superstition, fear, and authoritarian control. What he left was something simple but powerful. Believe in God, not because you can prove it, but because your moral life needs it. Practice religion, not through rituals, but through justice, honesty, and love. Worship, not with blind obedience, but with courageous conscience. In this view, God is not a fact to be proven. God is a moral necessity, an idea we live by when we choose to do the right thing, even when no one is watching. So where does Kant finally land? Not in a church, not in a doctrine, not even in a philosophical system. He lands in something simpler, something quiet. the human conscience. For Kant, that voice inside us, the one that tells us to be honest even when it hurts, to help even when it costs, is more sacred than any book or ritual. "Two things fill me with awe," Kant once wrote, "the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me." Religion, then, is not just something we believe, it's something we live. It's in the moment you return a lost wallet, in the decision to forgive when it's easier to blame, in the quiet strength it takes to do what's right, even when you're alone. Kant saw those small acts not just as ethics but as expressions of a deeper faith, a belief that goodness matters, that life has meaning, that we are more than clever animals, we are moral beings. Kant's God is not a crutch. He's not a rescue plan or a reward system. He's a moral ideal, something we point toward when we choose to live with justice, courage, and compassion. Believing in God for Kant is not about escaping suffering or begging for blessings. It's about living as if the world has moral order, even when it's hard to see. In this way, Kant protects both faith and freedom. He defends belief in God, but refuses to impose it. He respects religious traditions, but demands that they serve human dignity, not power. That's why he argued again and again that religion must be free, free to grow, free to question, free to be guided by conscience. In 1794, Kant was nearly 70 years old. He had written boldly about religion, arguing that the church should never control minds and that faith must be based on reason and morality, not fear. The King of Prussia ordered him to stop writing about religion. Kant, old and frail, answered with quiet defiance. He promised to remain silent, only out of respect for the king's authority, but he never admitted he was wrong. This moment tells us everything about him. He wasn't loud, he wasn't radical, but he stood for truth with a calm, unshakable strength. That's the spirit of his philosophy, and maybe the spirit of true religion too. Let's bring it all together. Kant did not try to prove God's existence with clever arguments. He didn't think that was possible. Instead, he asked a different question. What kind of world must exist if our moral lives are to make sense? And from that question, he drew three powerful conclusions. We must believe we are free, or morality is meaningless. We must believe our souls last beyond this life, or justice is a joke. We must believe there is a God, not because we can prove it, but because our conscience demands that goodness ultimately matters. For Kant, religion is not about obeying, it's about choosing. Choosing to live with honesty, with dignity, with hope. So here's our final thought for you. Kant didn't ask us to prove anything. He asked us to live as if goodness matters, to live as if freedom is real, to live as if justice, though delayed, is never denied. Whether or not you believe in God in a traditional sense, you can ask yourself, do I treat others as ends, not means? Do I act out of duty, not just benefit? Do I live in a way that reflects trust in something greater than myself? That's the kind of faith Kant defended. A quiet, rational, deeply human faith. Now it's your turn. What does faith mean to you? Is it belief in God, a commitment to conscience, or something else entirely? Let us know in the comments. And as always, thank you for thinking deeply with us.